Welcome to our webinar today entitled Business Resilience in the Era of COVID. My name is Colin Gelfer. I'm one of the co-founders of Atrium, and I'll be one of your hosts today. Also joining me from Atrium, we have Dave Dixon, who's a director in our analytics practice. And we also have Phil Cooper, VP of Product Management for Einstein at Salesforce.com. We're going to spend a few minutes discussing some emerging trends related to how companies are adapting to the disruption brought on by COVID-19. We'll then see some of these concepts in action. We'll actually look at how companies are taking quick approaches to dealing with customer acquisition during what's been obviously a pretty challenging time. And then we'll also spend some time looking at how companies are leveraging analytics to reactivate for growth and really retain their customers. And then we'll close the loop a bit with our demos and really focus around what's the impact from a service standpoint, how does that filter into maybe how we're handling things around logistics and orders shipping on time. And then Phil Cooper is going to spend some time with us really talking through kind of why Einstein and Salesforce to really address some of these challenges that we're facing. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about just how to get started. What's the path forward? Real quick, I realize that for many of you, Atrium's maybe not a household name just yet. So before we jump into the meat of the content, just a little context around our organization. Atrium's a platinum Salesforce consulting partner that's really focused on taking insights from Einstein, both descriptive analytics and machine learning generated insights, and pushing those into the workflow of an end user so that they can take action. And that action is often taken in cloud applications, things like Sales Cloud and Service Cloud, and Marketing Cloud, and really broader parts of the Salesforce platform. So at Atrium, we're really trying to bring three elements together here. It's business strategy paired with data science skills and the ability to implement cloud applications with a data-driven approach, Salesforce really being chief among those applications. And we're doing this at some of Salesforce's largest customers. I'm not going to read all the logos, but the last thing I'll add here is we're also a Tableau partner. So if you're needing help navigating conversations around, when do I use Tableau versus Einstein, or maybe even better than that, when do I use them together, we can definitely help out on that front. So we have this kind of funny little cartoon here, but it really encapsulates what a lot of companies are grappling with. In the cartoon, we see a meeting going on discussing maybe some languishing plans around digital transformation. And we see this quickly approaching wrecking ball that is COVID-19. So obviously, when you and the companies that you work for set your plans in motion for 2020, I'll venture a guess that none of you had built into your planning assumptions a global pandemic. If you did, well, tip of the hat to you. The impact's been pretty wide ranging. And maybe you're one of those companies that thought, hey, I've got 2 to 3 years to really nail our digital transformation. But I think what we're all realizing is that in some way, we're really living in this notion of hyperspeed right now. We can't take 2 to 3 years to reinvent ourselves, right? The needs of the business, they're immediate. It's all about what can I sell today? Are my suppliers back up today? What's driving the surge in demand today? And frankly, the number of questions that are being asked of the business and technology leaders, they're just continuing to grow. So during this time at Atrium, we've actually been asking all of our clients and prospects, where do you sit on this pain spectrum that you see here down below? And it really is a wide range, right? It's all the way from, hey, COVID's got nothing on me, we're doing just great, we're actually doing fantastic, all the way to, on the other end of the spectrum, we're on total lockdown, highest level of pain. And of course, many businesses are somewhere in between. And, the stories, they do run the gamut, but as challenging as it's been, it's also been pretty inspiring. What's really inspiring is not the companies who are crushing it because they were in the right place at the right time. Again, tip of the hat to folks like Zoom, but there's a bit of element of luck there. I think what's really inspiring is the companies who are maybe in the middle tier, the 6s, the 7s, the 8s, that are quickly adapting to the new realities and figuring out how to pivot their businesses and attract customers that maybe they've never even thought of before, or creating new processes overnight around things like fulfillment and contactless engagement. But every company is being disrupted by this crisis. We know that. Even companies that are crushing it due to a surge in demand, everyone is at some level really having to rethink their processes and their go-to-market motions. Okay, so how do we lead and move forward during this incredibly disruptive crisis? Well, a good place to start is understanding the different phases that you're likely going to encounter. All right, so the first phase is all about reacting and responding. It's a lot of triage. For those on the call that are maybe a little bit closer to my age, I'm in my mid-40s, maybe you remember the TV show MASH. I think it's a good analogy here. MASH was about a mobile Army surgical unit during the Korean War. Starred Alan Alda, great actor. Their whole mentality as a team was to quickly triage their patients and try to save as many lives as possible. And it wasn't by executing the perfect surgical techniques, but it was about moving fast and removing obstacles. So if you spent any time in the first phase here, it's probably felt a little bit like a MASH unit. But today we're going to focus most of our discussions on phases 2 through 4, how we pivot to these new realities and really reactivate for growth and hopefully accelerate new opportunities in our business. So I don't want to minimize phase 1. There's a lot of companies still in phase 1. I was actually reading an article the other day about cruise lines, and as of mid-June, there were still 40,000 people stranded on cruise ships, 40,000 cruise ship employees that were still stranded at sea. That's crazy, right? So clearly a lot of pain still out there, but today we're going to focus more on phases 2 through 4 and the pivot that we are all either making or will hopefully make soon. And if you want more information on phase 1, Salesforce has a ton of useful information on leading through change. They're doing a lot of great work with things like work.com, really helping companies, stabilize and get back to business. So highly recommend that you check out their Leading Through Change website that they've got posted. A lot of great content there. All right, so now that we know a lot of change is coming over the weeks, months, right, even years, some of these new realities are really starting to come into focus, though. The first is pretty obvious. For many companies, we have to do more with less. Many of the businesses that we're talking to, right, they've had their budgets cut, spending has been frozen. In some cases, they've even had to scale back their teams. But as we discussed kind of earlier in the webinar here, the demands on the business, the demands on IT, those are greater than ever. So we've got to do more with less. That's pretty obvious. The second reality, this shift to remote work, this one's starting to feel permanent for a lot of companies, right? Of course, offices aren't going to go away, but more and more companies are realizing that not only can you have a remote workforce, but you can thrive in that model. And the move to remote, that's going to change how your teams sell and service their customers. Digital engagement clearly takes on even more emphasis in a remote model. And then the third one, this notion that, something like this has never happened before, really forcing companies to adapt and change. How do you create a playbook for something that has never happened before? That's an interesting question. Well, while this notion that something like this has never happened before is certainly true, we also know that innovation is often born out of crisis. And while there's really no modern equivalent to today's disruption that we're seeing, we've actually seen in recent times major technology innovations that have blossomed, right, at times of crisis. So I think this timeline is pretty interesting. It's basically plotting all of the major downturns over the past 30 years. And what we've seen happen during these downturns has been a significant acceleration in the adoption of emerging technologies. So for example, right, desktop computers, they weren't invented in 1990 as a response to the recession, but they certainly became pervasive in the workplace at that point. In 2001, we saw, a rapid acceleration of e-commerce, the ubiquity of the internet. The internet was, everywhere. In 2001, we saw the rapid acceleration of cloud, right? Cloud wasn't invented during the Great Recession, but we saw it really explode during that time. And so I think the interesting question here is, what trends can we expect to see accelerate in the post-COVID landscape? And certainly we touched on a couple of these already. The move to remote workforces, that's obviously going to accelerate. It's already accelerating now. Certainly more emphasis on virtual engagement. But the one that's really interesting to me is this notion in changes to buying patterns. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a story here. I was on with a customer a couple months back, and this notion of changing business patterns really started to crystallize for me. He said, "Hey, Colin, my pre-COVID data, in some ways, while still valuable, it's less relevant. What I really want to know is, since COVID hit, where are we winning now? And are those patterns different?" He went on to say, "I'm pretty sure they are." And you can kind of see this concept reflected in the slide here, right? So we continued our discussion. He went on to say, "We've still been closing business during COVID, and I want to understand what those new patterns are. And I want to figure out, how do I propagate those patterns across my sales team so we know where we need to focus our resources?" So in this slide, very simple example, right? You can see kind of pre-COVID, I've got my two customer segments. Customer segment one's been dominating. As we moved into COVID, customer segment one's tailed off, but we've seen an uptick in customer segment two. And oh, by the way, those deals are closing a lot more quickly. So how do I ensure my entire team knows that motion and has that sales play top of mind? Well, that's a great question. So our demo coming up shortly, we'll show you a couple of these examples. Okay, so as you go forward, I think it's really important to recognize that depending where you fall on that spectrum that we talked about and what industry you're in, your playbook is going to be different, right? Everybody's at different spots on that spectrum, but it will have common themes. And right here, we're kind of showing what are those four common themes. So the first one's really interesting. We're definitely seeing an emphasis on decision-making. So interesting article from the Harvard Business Review that looked at past economic disruptions, and they said companies that were able to exit more quickly from that disruption were able to really emphasize decision-making and really take almost a decentralized approach, making sure that the right information was getting out to people who could act on it. And they compared and contrasted that to this notion of kind of taking a command and control approach. And so I'm not saying that you're going to be able to kind of change your org structure and your culture overnight, move from command and control to decentralized, but I think it definitely speaks to the need to push insights and information out to the folks who are closest to the problems and can make those decisions quickly. The second one here, so, right, we talked about this. You don't have 2 to 3 years to kind of reinvent your organization right now. It's about rapid response and taking bite-sized initiatives to really drive value. It almost feels like a little bit more grassroots. We'll see a lot of these initiatives spring up at a departmental level. The third one's pretty obvious, right? There's just going to be a greater emphasis on data. And the winners, right? Those are going to be the folks who look at data as the agility layer. How do I, procure data, surface data, blend data together, and really cultivate meaningful insights in a rapid fashion. And then obviously a lot more focus on automation based on some of the constraints we're going to see from a capacity and resourcing standpoint. So wanted to just, share a couple of those trends before we jump into the demo. We'll pivot now and really kind of look at Salesforce and how we've enabled some of these use cases. So in our first vignette, in this demo, you're going to see really three things. One, how can you recast your analytics for quick insights, really identify potentially emerging trends, and then how do I prioritize resources to take advantage of those emerging trends? And then the third piece is really taking more of a management view. All right, now that our folks are out there and taking advantage of these trends, how can I really uh, understand where we're going to land as a business? And then more importantly, have some coaching moments based on some of the insights that I'm seeing within my business. All right. So again, just to orient you to what you're seeing here. So right now I'm in Salesforce, and this is actually Sales Cloud, but what you're seeing up top here, kind of my first little spot that I'm landing, is really an overview of how my business is tracking. So think of this persona as maybe a view for somebody who's in sales ops or sales leadership, and they want to see overall how's their business tracking, and are there any insights that may be worthwhile to share with their team. And so a couple of things that we'll walk through here real quickly. On the left side, I can see all the business that's closed won. I can see how I'm tracking a quota, but I can also see Einstein's take at the forecast. And I can start to look at what my field is saying that their forecast is and do a comparison, right? Is there a gap between the two? And we'll come back to that in a second when we start looking through our management kind of scenario here and how we're tracking with our overall forecast. But real quickly, I can see orders by industry. There's no surprises to me here. I know that banking's our top industry, and so I'm assuming that's going to outpace the rest of the industries I support. And so, by the way, this is a company in our little demo scenario here that sells, computer hardware, technology hardware, monitors, laptops, servers, and I can see the mix of my business, right? And nothing's kind of jumping off the page here. This kind of looks, in general, typically how we've tracked. And I can also see some product trending over time. But when it gets interesting for me is if I just click on banking, all right, first of all these dashboards are dynamic. So when I filter down on banking, I can quickly see that, hey, there are trends that are emerging in my business. And this makes sense as somebody who's selling, computer hardware, workstations, laptops, and monitors to the financial services industry. We know that they've moved a lot of their employees into the home. They still got to service their customers. And so we've seen an uptick here in laptops and in monitors so that folks can be productive at home. All right. Well, that's great. You're probably thinking, well, that's really basic. He's just showing me a sales trending report. And I agree, that is pretty basic. But where it gets interesting is how do I ensure that our sales team can take advantage of that insight? How do I know that this is part of their selling motion going forward, that they're going to focus their outreach efforts around trying to drive monitors and laptops based on some of the emerging trends? Okay. So I'm going to actually click over here and I can see accounts, likelihood to purchase for the quarter. And I'm going to drill actually into this customer here, Bank of Bozeman. Great thing about Salesforce Analytics, right? I can action directly from the dashboard. So we're really blending the workflow, the transactional application with the analytics here so that I can immediately take action right from the dashboard. And I'm just going to actually go and open the record here. And this is how we really want to propagate this across our sales team. So instead of just telling everybody, hey, let's go focus on monitors and laptops in the financial services industry, what I want to do as a business is look at my data that we talked about, this change in business patterns. I want to go train a model around propensity to buy for laptops and monitors so that we can action that with our sales team. And that's what you're seeing here. So right now in this little widget, I can see that I've got a 75% propensity to buy laptops and monitors. It's giving me the leading causes, right? We know one of them, it's in industry is related to banking. That's true. It's an existing customer. So we have a relationship there. That's helping us out. And it's also giving me ways that I can improve this score, right? Maybe we should be scheduling a business review. Maybe we should be creating an action plan. In our second vignette, we'll actually show you how you tie these scores to next best actions. You can even take this information and build a simple call down list off of this. But this is really, I think where we all need to get to is how do we take advantage of this recent snapshot of data, maybe go back, 2 months, 13 weeks, right? And train a quick model that we can then push out to our sales team so that they can prioritize their day. All right. So again, really quick example around exploring your data, finding an insight and saying, hey, I've got to go out and actually push this to my field. All right. So getting back to now kind of the management view, I'm going to click on our little link here with Pipeline Assistant. So I've pushed out an insight to our field. I've told them who are the most important customers for them to be calling on. They've all been creating opportunities. Business is starting to move forward. Now I want to do a sanity check around my team. How are they really doing? And so we're going to take it up a level, and you could maybe think I'm an AVP or maybe I'm managing a region here. And again, what we're trying to drive towards is a comparison between what's the field saying their forecast is and what is Einstein saying the forecast is. And sometimes salespeople have happy years. Sometimes they sandbag a little bit. And we want to take a data-driven approach to really understanding where are we going to land, because frankly, having predictability in your business is really important. And so in this example, I can see the RVPs for my team. I can see the delta between what Einstein says the forecast is in green, and I can see what the field is saying, and I can see I've got a pretty significant gap here. So I'm going to click on Julie Chavez, and I can see right away that a lot of that gap is with one of her AEs, Laura Garza. And what's even more interesting, I can see what some of those top contributors are to the forecast delta and what some of the negative contributors are. So what's helping her is she's got a bunch of deals where she's partnering with a good partner. She's got some business value assessments that have been completed. But she's got a bunch of deals where the deals are in commit, but we haven't even sent out a quote. All right. So what this is going to do, this is going to prompt a coaching moment between Julie and Laura to say, hey, why do we have this gap here? And maybe how can we address that and just make sure that we're taking the right steps with our customers to close this business. The other thing I'll mention is as we've started to kind of click down on some of this information, you can see the interactivity below where, I've got my dashboard up top and I've got my records down below, and then I can drive into a record. And so that's a really nice feature that we see with Einstein, where you can see that related list as I drill into my dashboard. Okay, so that was kind of our first, quick and dirty vignette around how to take advantage of some of these opportunities around just quickly changing business patterns, how to push out a quick model. We're going to jump into another demo. And this next demo is really focused around how do I grow and retain our customers, right? And so maybe your business, you've maybe seen an explosion in demand due to COVID. We see this a lot in the financial services industry with mortgage companies, right? There's a lot of refi going on. Their business is strong. We see it with some of the technology providers, who are focused on work from home solutions. Their business is really strong. And so they've brought in maybe more customers than they anticipated. And how do we ensure that not only do we retain those customers, but we grow their lifetime value? So this portion of the demo is really focused around how do we grow and retain customers. So in this example, right, I showed you kind of the sales example where we're selling laptops and monitors. And now I'm going to take on the persona of somebody who's selling service contracts, right? And in a lot of businesses, we know that service contracts, when you have a support contract, it helps you stay stickier with your customers. It helps ensure their success. Kind of becomes a little bit of a virtuous cycle here. And so our first step is really going to be to look and see, all right, how do we white space where our opportunities are? So I land on my homepage. I've got this initial dashboard. Maybe I'm somebody who leads a service support sales team, and I want to just understand, where do I have existing customers but have no contracts? And so I can quickly come into this dashboard and select none and hit the apply button. And you can see right away that I've narrowed down to potentially a list of opportunities here for us to go sell service contracts. And what becomes really interesting, so I see Acme Supply Company, and their propensity to buy, it's not bad. We'll show you this model in a second. They've got a propensity to buy service contracts at around 60. Their account health is not great. It's been decreasing. We'll show you the account health dashboard in a little bit here, but probably makes sense for us to create an opportunity for this customer for a service agreement. So in this demo, you can see here, I've got the ability to action right from this list of customers. I can create a new opportunity. I can create a renewal opportunity, right? Maybe they're an existing customer for support, or I can even amend an opportunity. I can also take other actions like schedule a business review or create an action plan, right? So I have all these opportunities to action on this information right from my dashboard, because that's what we're doing here. We're embedding insights into the workflow of the end user. So I'm not going to create the opportunity in front of you because people don't like watching me enter data in the middle of a live demo, but I'm actually going to click on the Acme propensity model here. And I can see I got an opportunity created. My likelihood to win is pretty low, right? I haven't done an ROI analysis with the customer yet. That's really kind of dragging down my score. And, maybe I could improve my likelihood to win by offering a discount. But the cool part is we're not just going to give this rep a score and just tell them to figure it out. We're actually going to give them a next best action. And so this is the nice part about Salesforce. In addition to just surfacing that insight, we can actually tell our team members what actions to take. So here, Einstein's recommending that you request a quote. Sounds like a logical step, and maybe even talk to finance to review and determine discount options. And so these are really the rules that we're wrapping around our model or our score here to help improve our outcome. All right, so that's one example. I'm going to go back to my dashboard and maybe just kind of talk through the renewals process here. And I'm going to click home. And again, I have all these filters at the top, and I can look and say, all right, show me all customers that have an expiring service agreement in the next 3 months. Maybe I want to try to pull forward getting that renewal closed. So again, in the next 3 months, I'm just going to hit the click select there, right? And I can see I've got 2 customers here. One's got an account health of about 65, and the propensity to buy is a little bit low. Maybe let's go take a look, and I can see that my rep has already created a renewal opportunity. I can see it. I've already looked at some of these recent opportunities, and we'll drill into the renewal. And again, this is an opportunity score on this renewal opportunity, and it gives you not only the top reasons or factors why it's scoring the way it is, but also it's telling you how to improve, right? And you can wrap that into next best action. Really eliminates the need in some cases for our teams to kind of think about what to do next. We're helping them by surfacing these actions to them directly, and they can contact finance, or maybe they can complete an ROI analysis here. So that was the example around renewals. We'll go back to our dashboard here and just show you one more example about how we can take advantage of some of these capabilities. So I want to take a look at all of my customers, right, where the ROI related to our existing service agreements has exceeded 100%. Maybe we're over delivering. We're covering more products than we anticipated in the original agreement. And, this usually kind of signifies that, we've probably got to amend this opportunity. So I'm actually going to click on ROI and greater than 100. and I'm going to hit apply. And I can see I've got two customers here. We got Montana Credit Union, we got the Kennedy Health Clinic. And again, I've got the actionability to open up the record and do a little bit more digging here and really try to get to the root of the issue of, why is my health score 54? It's ticking up, that's good. My propensity to buy is really low. So let's do a little digging and open the record here. And now I'm on the account screen. And so what you can see here is we've got our embedded dashboard that gives us a couple key metrics. Are they on credit hold? What's their overall health score? What's the uptime look like? So maybe we're sourcing information around if it's capital equipment, how long has it been in the, for repair, whatever the case. And then we can also see the ROI for our current service agreement. And then what the likelihood to really potentially renew or, kind of extend their service agreement. What I do want to click into here, though, is give you a little bit more detail around the health score. And so these are descriptive analytics, right, that we're aggregating together to really gauge our overall relationship with a customer. So you can see it's a 54. I'm able to give you what's driving that score, right? Overall engagement's okay. Our support score, it's pretty low though. Average, days to repair is 8. That seems long. But I can also see, what percentage of SKUs we're actually covering here, the number of days since an uncovered purchase. So right from within, the workflow here, I can quickly isolate what some of the issues are around my relationship with this customer with the hopes that they will continue to renew with us and stay sticky as a customer.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Colin. So I think Colin's done a great job of walking us through sort of scenarios of how we might use insights, analytics, and predictions powered by Einstein within sort of the flow of Salesforce, right? To make decisions, to figure out where to focus our efforts and how to best react sort of during these uncertain times. But, what about those users that aren't in Salesforce? So maybe users in the back office that don't typically get into Salesforce, team members that might be in HR or logistics and supply chain or other back office predictions that use Tableau for their insights, but they would like to consume the sort of the power of the predictions that you could get from Einstein. Well, there's a way to do that. So if you're a supply chain or a logistics user and you've already got your top 10 favorite dashboards in Tableau, it wouldn't make sense from an experience perspective to have you go into Salesforce to pull up your 11th dashboard to see a prediction. So we at Atrium have created a mechanism for surfacing those Einstein predictions within Tableau, and I'm going to showcase that here in just a second. But really, the way this works to kind of keep it at a high level is that we're able to take the data, bring it into Einstein, train the model within Einstein. And when we do that, that data is persisted. It lives within the Einstein Analytics space. We use some functionality that's in Tableau, the Tableau Web Data Connector, in conjunction with a custom service that we've created, basically a service that you could run on Amazon AWS or on Google. We've got a Docker image for it so we can deploy it to many different cloud platforms to allow us to basically surface the results of the Einstein predictions within a Tableau dashboard. So the main reason to do this, again, is just to get that functionality, that capability that's within Einstein without having to navigate into the Salesforce environment. So I'm going to show you what that would look like. So, all right. So what we have here is a Tableau dashboard. So if you're a Tableau user, this probably looks familiar. And in this use case, my persona is a supply chain manager. So as a supply chain manager, I want to understand how I'm doing, what my trends are, where my inventory is moving in and out. But I also want to make sure that we're focused on that order to delivery customer experience so that we're ensuring that we're hitting our customer SLAs and proactively reaching out to our customers if we think we're not going to be able to get a shipment to them on time. Well, how do I know how long an order is going to take to ship? Well, Einstein can help with that. So in this dashboard here, we have our large orders that are typically and traditionally in danger of taking an extra long time to ship. And we can see over here an Einstein prediction card. It looks very similar to what we would experience within Salesforce. And we have an estimated days to ship, and we can also see why it's happening. So things that are driving the length of time that it's going to take this order to ship. So in this case, it doesn't take as long because the orders exceeding false is true. It's going to take a little longer because the US region is central. And then the total amount is within a range, a volume range that is typically associated with larger orders. And then our baseline, our average is 12.46. And so as I click through here, this will update. So I've clicked a new order here, and I can see that my order's estimated days to ship is updated as well. And so with this mechanism, with a combination of the power of Einstein to provide predictions and then Tableau to surface those insights, we really can expose that prediction power of capability, that descriptive power of why we're predicting what we are, to anyone within the organization through Tableau. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Phil Cooper to continue to talk about some of the benefits and strategies we can use with Einstein in these uncertain times. So Phil?
Awesome, great, thanks Dave. So yeah, let's, so what we wanted to do here, guys, was just unpack a little bit the how and some of the enabling capabilities behind what you've just been seeing from the Atrium team. So again, my name is Phil Cooper. I lead the intelligence track for Einstein Analytics. So I'm in product management. I've been at Salesforce for about 6.5 years working on analytics and machine learning. That's me. So let's, next slide, please, Colin. Thanks. So just for those of you who are not aware, I see from some of the questions, the powering technology behind the predictive elements that the Atrium team was showing you there is Einstein Discovery. And that's part of the EA Einstein Analytics Plus product stack. And it's all about enabling an analyst persona to automate and move quickly through the work of understanding the shape of their data, finding insights, and generating and deploying predictive models. So this is a capability that does supervised machine learning. I'll talk about the principles in a minute. It delivers a capability called component driver analysis, which may sound a little daunting, but that is all about finding why things happened. So moving beyond descriptive analysis into what were the drivers in the data? Why did an outcome happen? We have some North Star kind of principles that we apply to how we build machine learning models, one of which is about transparency and explainability. So none of this is ever black box. We focus on giving, making the box as clear as possible and allow the user who's building this stuff and deploying it to understand the shape of the data, the drivers, the accuracy, and lots of nuance around that so that they're confident in deploying these things to production. And then really super important is that with the whole space of machine learning that you monitor what's actually happening when you deploy models. There's a tendency for models to drift, to get less accurate over time. We've seen that in the context of the pandemic that Colin was talking about. The world changed and data changed as a result. So models that may have been great 6 months ago, guess what? They're probably not as accurate anymore. And if you're using them for decision making, you need to be on top of that. So monitoring is incredibly important. So it's just a very quick little bit there on terms of Einstein Discovery, what it's all about. But I wanted to give a little bit more, sort of get you some insight into how we think about this capability and how we prioritize what we work on. So we call these our design principles. And I mentioned outcome focus. That's really super important. When you start your analysis with Discovery, you have a business outcome in mind. We tend to boil that all the way down to a KPI or a set of KPIs that you want to improve. There's something in the business that you think you can move the needle on. There's something that's important to the organization. Colin showed some examples earlier on. That's informs how you get started. It's not so much bottom up of we've got some data, let's see what we can find in it. It's more around what is an outcome we can move the needle on in the business. So that's what we mean by KPI centricity. Immediacy, this is something that I think we're very differentiated on. And this is all about fast time to value and taking on many different problems. In some instances, it can be transformative. If you can find insight, deliver a predictive model to solve a problem quickly, we think that can be transformative in business, especially now. And again, you heard some concepts there around in our current context. Agility is incredibly important for organizations as they respond to the new working environment and changes in their business. Colin brought up examples of that. that implies that you need to change and respond to how you deliver analytics, what you measure, and what you predict. So we think immediacy is very, very important here. The antithesis of this would be the 9-month, 2-year custom machine learning project where you're betting the farm on a really big thing. This is the opposite. This is like, let's take on lots of different use cases, experiment fast, respond to those, and get them out there, and then manage them. There's always a balance there, but we think there's tons of value in getting to these problems quickly. Course correction. So this is about enabling decision making. So ultimately, we're putting insights and predictions in the hands of the end user so that they can make a decision. And that may be confirmation of what they're already were going to do, or it could be a course correction. So this is where we move, and Dave just showed you an example where you don't just have the prediction, you have insight about what you might be able to do to improve that outcome. So it's analogous to if I'm using Google Maps and I'm getting a prediction on when I'm going to arrive at my destination, Google saying, here's an alternative route that we think might be better than the one you typically take. Or this one that you typically take is actually going to be 3 minutes slower. So it's actionable, and it's giving you the ability to, in that case, literally course correct. We're doing the same thing in business. And then iteration, this may seem a little bit similar to immediacy. It's slightly different. We see in the world of machine learning, there's a critical element is how fast you can move between dealing with data, wrangling and aggregating and getting access to data, and structuring it in a way such that you can deliver accurate predictive models, and the actual work of model training and evaluation. There's a cycle that you need to work through there. I'll talk about it in a minute. That is very, very evident. And I've seen examples of customers doing hundreds and hundreds of iterations through models before they get to what they wanted. So this notion of supporting that is incredibly important for us. And it's sort of baked into our user experience and how we deliver the capability. So it's just some thoughts for you on the design principles behind how Einstein Discovery works. Let's look at how ML projects actually work in the real world. Now we simplify this a little bit. Next slide, please. We simplify this down to kind of 3 major areas and align those with who does the work. So this is, if you were taking a conventional approach today to delivering some of those predictions that you've just seen in the demo vignettes, this is kind of what you would need to do. So you've got to get access to data. You probably have some specialists who do that. They're either business analysts, they may be data engineers. Once they have data, you start exploring it, understanding it. You then need to reshape it, connect it, aggregate, maybe do feature engineering. You're probably going to iterate through that many times. And as you move into the modeling phase, you're certainly going to come back to this numerous times to refactor, maybe to try and tease out additional predictive signal, or to deal with problems in your data where you have gaps, things like that. You're going to be in a loop cycling through it. And the same thing applies to the evaluation. So I've trained a model. How good is it? I want to build another one and see if I can move the needle on accuracy. So the evaluation phase, and going back to changing your settings, maybe trying different algorithms. We support all these kind of approaches where you can run a model tournament and look at different algorithms and see how they respond. And likewise, and through all your different versions of a model, you may go backwards, right? You may get worse and you may want to revert. So this is a very much a cyclical thing that you're going to work through. And then that's all the easy part. The hard part is deploying this into a production application so that someone who's in the business process is actually consuming it. So you saw there examples where an end user is enjoying predictions and is using them in their workflow. That is, in my opinion, and what I've seen in the market, is oftentimes the hardest part, is bringing that actually to the front office into the end user's application. So there tends to be a different persona there. You may be writing Java code to take that model and deploy it in the front office application. Very different from the skills that the data scientist might have, or certainly the data analyst. So what we propose and what we focus on with Einstein Analytics is developing a capability that spans across this spectrum, across all these phases of delivering traditional ML, and does it for a kind of different class of user. So Colin, you can hit the next slide. So we have built into the whole stack all of these capabilities. So the data, access to data, aggregating it, joining it, exploring it, using the machine to tease out predictive signal, understand the shape of the data, the insights from the data, and then train models, evaluate them, and deploy them. So we've done this kind of end to end, and we consider this to be addressable by a slightly different persona. So we're introducing this concept of a business scientist, and this is someone who typically, you may know them in your organizations, someone who's very data literate, they're close to the business, they deal with BI tools, they deal with data, they probably do a lot in Excel, they know what a VLOOKUP is, they can pivot data, those kinds of things. They are at sort of the level where we can bring them on a journey to take them through an end-to-end machine learning lifecycle. So that's in essence what we're doing with this stack. And I'll explore a little bit more detail going forward of how that might work elsewhere. Next slide, please. So let's look at that user a little bit and how they fit in the enterprise. So we've put them fair and center in the middle at the top here, business scientists, and we're providing with that automation I talked about, and with this full stack, we're guiding them and helping automate through the steps of delivering machine learned models. So it's a productivity enabler and it's an agility capability. How quickly can they do this? You're adding new folks, you're expanding the scope of people within the enterprise who can do this work. To complement what I consider kind of the hardcore data scientists, the PhDs, the statisticians, those folks who are doing scripting and are doing very, very fine-grained work on probably big ticket items, big problems in the enterprise. They're still doing that work. We see tons and tons of use cases emerging that they can't get to simply bandwidth-wise and speed-wise. And so we want to arm this set of personas in the middle here, business scientists, to do that work. Ultimately, they're all delivering value to the end user. So what you saw, I hope, was examples of intelligent experiences where the CRM becomes very much a guidance system. It's responsive to the user. It's making predictions and recommendations, providing insight, providing actionability. That's what we mean by intelligent experience. And that's ultimately for the end user. So the business scientist's work is ultimately supporting their front office compadres. And the data scientists are doing that too, but just the tools that they use to do it are slightly different. So a quick spectrum there. And of course, there is an opportunity as well for analysts to enjoy kind of what we consider AI augmented analysis, which expands also in a slightly different way via things like bots and natural language query to grow the audience of people who consume analytics, who don't necessarily want to be in the mode of things like dashboard building. Give them the tools to do that as well. So that's more of an AI inside, AI embedded, whereas in the middle here and on the right, we're authoring new models. I hope that helps with respect to the spectrum. Let's look at the stack really quickly. So the stack is currently, if you go and build a conventional stack, I believe it's a deterrent to agility. It's the exact opposite. So we've, for those of you who've been around a while in the space, this may look reasonably familiar for a visualization stack. You build integration, you use integration tools. You probably have a data warehouse or data lake of some form. You may be moving that to the cloud with a Snowflake or a Redshift or a BigQuery, something like that. You probably have to aggregate and organize your data into marts around functional areas. Or for a particular business unit, something like that, typically a domain. And then you put visualization tools on top to explore it. You build dashboards for consumption. You have a whole stack and a whole bunch of tools who align with those things. Now, with the advent of more widespread use of AI, we've kind of emerged into a whole new parallel stack. And you can build this out. Thank you. So there's a new set of technologies which are similar but different, and provide quite slightly different kind of workloads from the conventional analytics stack. So you see enterprises building this second parallel world, which this is costly, and it doesn't facilitate that agility that we're looking for. So there's a whole ton of tools fitting in this right-hand side here. You can click the next slide. Thanks. So I'm not picking on anyone. There are lots of open source, lots of great capabilities here in the market, but you can go and build this stuff with a whole set of tools combining to that stack to try and deliver it. And you've got a kind of glue code nightmare is what we see. You spend a whole ton of time doing integration between those things in order to deliver the final result. And that's where, again, we see, I think, a gap between what discrete usage by a data scientist in a specific tool, in say Python, running on an environment for them, or in Jupyter Notebooks, something like that. They can do great work there. It's really challenging to operationalize that and scale it and put it in the front office in a production capacity and somewhere where it's managed. So you're looking at model accuracy, looking at the impact of the predictions, that kind of thing, what I consider where the rubber meets the road. So we see a huge gap there, and a lot of things being stuck in the lab, I think, because of this proliferation of many tools that are not integrated. So we propose a different approach with EA+. We have a complete stack here in Einstein Analytics where we embed all of the tools that you need to get the job done. If you can hit the next slide, Colin. We put these things together in ENEA+. So we bring the machine learning to the data. We bring the data prep to the data. We bring natural language query. We bring the visualization layer, all those things together in one stack so that you can do this quickly and iterate through it. And you're taking on what may historically have been considered very different workloads for machine learning versus descriptive analytics. They operate on the same data platform. And we bring some of the best of breed things emerging in the market, Spark being a good example of that. We bring that to you, but in the form of a service that's aggregated, and we operationalize it as a SaaS vendor. We run that thing. We're accountable for the infrastructure and availability, etc. So it's an accelerator and enabler of agility to do this. Next slide. So I'll hand it back, I think, Colin, to you, and I think it makes sense to, hopefully we've illustrated a little bit how this works behind the scenes and how we can yield in results. But I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about how you get started with this kind of use case.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. All right. So let's just start out maybe kind of framing what the typical journey around data science has been for a lot of folks. So it's interesting. A lot of times clients will come to us and say, we've been trying data science for a while, really struggled. And I think a lot of that is around the expectations and how they've approached these problems in the past. And so a lot of times clients and prospects will come to us and they'll say, we thought data science was going to have all the answers. If we just threw our data and, built an algorithm, we'd be off to the races. And, in some cases, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Where we see clients having a lot of success, and to Phil's point, it's really about focusing on specific outcomes, right? What problems would be meaningful to solve? Can we find signal in our data, right, to drive those outcomes? And then the last piece here, and really we think kind of the most important piece, is that a lot of the value comes from the last mile. How is somebody going to act on that information? In some cases, there's trade-offs. We see, hey, do I want to spend a lot of time and burn a lot of calories trying to get that, incremental 0.1% in my, my prediction, the accuracy of my prediction, or do I focus on how am I going to serve that up? How is the prediction going to be consumed in the workflow? And so we're big believers that it's really critical to figure out that last mile, how those insights are going to be consumed. So it's kind of a typical path that we see folks take where, maybe they stumble out of the blocks, they refocus towards specific outcomes, and then they really start to see success take off with this focus around the last mile. All right, so how do you get started? And you've heard us talk a lot about outcomes and use cases. At Atrium, we're using a technique, we call it the Business Resiliency Workshop. And it's really an opportunity to surface those use cases that are going to be most meaningful to the business, understand the value behind those. And we take a really, kind of design-centric approach to this. We start with, let's just understand a couple of different personas and, are there certain questions that they can't answer today about their business? And we align on those questions and the criticality of those. And that really starts to prioritize our objectives and build consensus around how to go forward. And then the next piece is really about how do we take those insights and those ideas and put it into action. So this is a 2-day workshop that we offer. Typically, in a lot of cases, we're doing this as investment. And, you know, based on the fact that we're doing a lot of these remote now, we tend to break it up over, you know, multiple days, try to keep the sessions, you know, from spanning beyond, you know, 2-3 hours, because a lot of people having, you know, fatigue with web conferences and things like that. But really great approach to really sussing out what those important use cases are and how a company can pivot back to growth and, you know, supporting their go-to-market processes in this disruptive cycle. And then what often comes out of this is, and this is an example, right, where we start to pull all these use cases together, and we can start to plot them out in terms of speed to realization versus business value. Right, the ones in the upper right, those are the ones we want to go chase. It's the ones we can get at fast that have high value. That's our low-hanging fruit, even though it's in the upper right. And as a part of the output of this workshop, not only do you have the prioritized use cases and potentially the business value analysis associated with that, but we also have wireframes and prototypes so that we can start to build alignment and consensus very quickly with your organization. So I just wanted to leave that with the team to think about. It's a great way to really start to put some of these concepts in action. We've got a minute left, and so we probably don't have a lot of time for questions. If you want to follow up directly with either myself or Dave or Phil, feel free to reach out. We'll send a follow-up coming out of this webinar. And last, I just want to say thank you to everybody for participating, and thank you to Phil for joining us today, and Dave for helping to support the demos and the webinar. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.